What's your I finally met my online friend horror story? This is way back in the mid-90s. Bulletin board systems were all the rage. I made friends with this guy from NC. He was friends with a bunch of us from my dorm, mostly females, which should probably have been a red flag, but I was extremely naive at the time. A couple months in, he mentioned he was coming to our state for a wedding and asked if he could come by our college to meet everyone. It was agreed he'd sleep in my dorm room since my roommate was almost never around. Now, there was no discussion or thought of sex, but I was pretty excited to meet this guy and see if he was as funny and charming as he was online. Well, day arrives, dude shows up. I should mention that I and all my college friends were 18 or 19, this guy was 24. Or so he said. Guy looked like, and I'm not exaggerating, a cancer patient. Pale, gaunt features, long greasy pale blonde hair except where he was bald on top, and just generally looked like he was about to die or he was dressed as a ghoul for Halloween. He insisted on hugging all of us. I was trying to remind myself that looks don't matter and that he was a cool guy despite his very unsettling appearance. But then, when we all started hanging out, things just got worse. He was asking really invasive questions of all of us, making weird comments to whatever was said, just all around creepy and distressing. I was sitting on the floor with another friend and actively rocking back and forth from discomfort. I lied and said I had hurt my back and that sleeping on the floor helped, because that night he kept insisting we could share my tiny twin college bed. Nope. Last time I ever met anyone from that site. I know I wouldn't have slept that night. I really didn't. Not only was on the hard dorm floor, I was pretty freaked out about the whole thing. Said he was 14. Turns out he was 38. My parents gave him a stern talking to. Edit. He was always nice and friendly online until I found his Facebook and saw his age, at which my parents had a mental breakdown. I was never allowed to play video games with him online again. Born on a leap year, obviously. I met a guy online. We really got on and he came over a few times so we could hang out. I did find him attractive and tried to hint that I was into him. Note, I can't flirt to save my life, but nothing ever happened. After a few dates, he suddenly vanished offline. No social media, he wasn't answering texts or emails, nothing. I thought he'd ghosted me. After 6 months he reappears. I asked him where he'd been and he said, I don't want to talk about it. A few weeks after, there was a fad where people were Googling their names and posting humorous stories they had found about similar people with their name. Mine was about a ship that had my initials, and I started to Google friends' names just out of boredom, morbid curiosity. Googled his name and found a local news story from his area, one of those crime and courts things that he had been done for statutory rape of a minor, online grooming, and had his computer and phone seized as evidence. Guy I knew in college met a girl online and spent every day talking about her. She lived about 6 hours away, so he planned to take a semester off and pursue this relationship. He got a job in her town and asked if I'd help him move out there since my car would hold more than he could take on a bus. I had a long weekend off and figured, why not? A road trip could be fun. I'd drive him out as a goodbye present, and the way back I planned to visit Yellowstone. Well, we arrive and it turns out he doesn't have an apartment lined up and he found a job posting in his girlfriend's town. He hadn't actually gotten the job, or even applied yet. I make a bunch of phone calls and find him a room to rent that will let him move in that day with just first, last, and deposit, even without a job. I'm tired and disgusted with his lack of planning, but figure it's worth staying the night and trying to end things on good terms with my buddy. Then he breaks down and confesses that he hasn't actually met this girl. The nights he spent, video chatting, with her were really just him watching her vlog. They've never talked, never texted, never even emailed. Hell, he's never even left so much as a comment or like on one of her videos. She genuinely didn't, still doesn't, know he existed. His plan was to hang out at this game shop she talks a lot about until she showed up and somehow create a relationship from that. He thought that they'd meet and she'd fall in love with him and move back to our college town to marry him, all before the next semester began. That didn't happen. Instead, I made my buddy buy a bus ticket for his ride back to school and left. He came back to school and got more cringy, not less. I lost track of him after that. I don't know if it's a horror story, but it's how I ended up where I live now. I played WoW for years with a pretty regular group, got to know them offline, and at one point two of them, a couple, invited me to move across the country. At the time I didn't have anything tying me to where I was, so I packed up and moved. Got out here, moved in with my friends, and everything seemed okay. My buddy was a long-haul driver, so he was always gone for days at a time. His girl would try to set me up multiple times with two girls she knew, one in Minnesota. I ended up having a hard time finding work for a while. Finally got a job though and was putting some money away while helping watch their kids. Out of nowhere one day my buddy accuses me of trying to fool around with his girl. Nothing had ever happened, but I had noticed her spending more and more time in my room when he wasn't there. He wouldn't listen, so I got kicked out without any warning, and they stole about $1,000 worth of my stuff and later moved. Ultimately it all worked out for me. Cut the friend and his girl out of my life completely and moved on. Now I have a good job here, wife and kids. What happened to their relationship? They stole together? After they kicked me out, they eventually moved to the Houston area. After some time there she ran off to her home state, Minnesota, taking their kids, 3 from a previous relationships, 1 with him, without telling him. We were friends online for years. We'd meet up every so often, and when we started families we'd meet up and take the kids to the zoos or whatever. She wanted us to go on a cruise together, with our husbands and kids. I made the comment towards the effect of, "We can't afford that," and she went nuts. "We shouldn't have had kids if we can't afford them. We shouldn't have more children. Our life sucks blah blah blah," because I didn't want to go on a goddamn cruise with her and her bratty ass kid. Sounds like a nightmare. I love how "we can't afford a cruise" turned into "you can't afford your whole life, you irresponsible pleb." A guy in a forum for a specific hobby would talk to me a lot, but never revealed his real identity. Until out of the blue he suddenly asked me to please come to see him in hospital, where he died a few weeks later. Did you go see him? Yes. His heart was failing. It was weird. I used to play WoW with my now ex. Our guild leader actually wound up moving to our state with his wife. My ex and I broke up before we got the chance to hang out with the guy. And right after the breakup he messaged my ex essentially asking if it was cool if he and his wife got me drunk and took advantage of me. Ex showed me screenshots when I was getting my stuff from his place, and I canceled my plans to meet the guy and his wife. After 4+ years of playing WoW together and chatting, online and on the phone, he invited me to visit him in Australia. I figured it was safe, since I'd known him for quite a while and had never gotten any weird vibes, no flirtation. No creepiness, nothing. 2 days into my very clearly stated platonic visit, he tried to rape me. I ditched all of my stuff except what I had in a small duffel bag and took off, traveling on my own for the 2 weeks until my flight home. A few months later, I received an unsigned postcard from the Gold Coast that just said, "Thinking of you," with a smiley face. This is more of an embarrassment story. When I was in high school in the 90s, I was active on the local dial-up BBS scene. I was friends with someone who went by the handle Venus. I knew she was a woman but had no idea what she looked like. I also knew she was dating a guy in real life with the handle Lord Gumby, who was also a friend online. Being a socially misadjusted 15-year-old, I had a crush on her anyway, even though I knew they were both like 18. This was like 1992, so privacy wasn't as big a concern, and they knew my address. This was also when people would randomly come by your house to see if you were home. That's unfathomable today. So one Saturday morning I'm at home on my computer, totally disheveled, unshowered, and just gross in ratty sweatpants and no shirt. I hear a knock on the front door and go open it. There's a woman who was incredibly beautiful standing there, and she just goes, "Hi, I'm Venus." I stood there for a minute, it seemed like jaw dropped, trying to say something when Lord Gumby walked up and was like, "Hey doofus, ever met a woman before?" Needless to say, I wanted to sink into a hole in the ground and die. But I hung out with them, and I guess I wasn't too horrible because we hung out a lot after that. But that whole time I was like, fuck my life choices. We lost touch after I left for college. Haven't talked to them in decades. I wonder how they're doing. I've been active in numerous online communities over the years, and have been fortunate enough to hang out with many of the friends I've made there in person. There's only been one incident I couldn't cope with. He picked me up at the airport, which was very nice of him, and as soon as we got into the car, he started picking his nose. There's a lot that goes through your mind when you hop into a vehicle with someone you've never been alone with, and you immediately catch them 2 knuckles deep in their nose. I looked quickly away so that he wouldn't know I caught him and be embarrassed, if he was just trying to sneak one out before I noticed. If he did notice, he didn't seem embarrassed, so I relaxed a little. I guessed maybe he was just so confident about himself and our friendship that he'd ascended past caring if I saw him take care of a quick boog. When I finally looked back at him, he was wiping his fingers across his dashboard. To this day I'm not really sure what to think, but this guy spent the entirety of the few hours we were together scooping out boogers and wiping them off on parts of his car or the table, or wherever it was that we'd stopped at. I realized I was being transported in a rolling booger shrine and that there was nothing I could touch without needing to wash my hands. I was sitting on a crust of fossilized booger stuff. I didn't want to hurt his feelings, he was a nice dude, but I wound up ollieing out of our visit early because I couldn't handle it. I still wonder if I should have done or said anything to save him some grief in the future, but it didn't feel like it was my place. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.